The Duke mocked her for losing every match. She was letting him win to steal his fortune. March 15th, 1887. 3:47 in the afternoon. Rain hammers the windows of Ashworth Manor. Inside the grand library, Lady Eleanor Hartwick sits across from Duke Harrison Blackwell, a chessboard between them. The Duke moves his queen, taking her rook. His third consecutive victory this week. Really, Lady Eleanor, the Duke says, leaning back in his leather chair. I expected more from someone who studied in Vienna. Surely they taught you something about chess strategy. Eleanor's fingers tremble slightly as she tips her king, conceding defeat. She keeps her eyes downcast, cheeks flushed with apparent shame. Forgive me, Your Grace. I'm simply not very clever at these things. The Duke laughs, a sharp, cruel sound that echoes off the mahogany bookshelf. Not clever indeed. 13 matches we played, my dear. 13 losses for you. Perhaps you should stick to needlework. Eleanor rises from her chair, curtsying deeply. You're too kind to continue playing with someone of my limited abilities, Your Grace. Nonsense, he says, waving a dismissive hand. Your father and I have business to discuss. These little games pass the time pleasantly enough. Besides, he adds, his smile widening, I do so enjoy winning. What the Duke doesn't know is this. Lady Eleanor Hartwick has never lost a chess match in her life. Not to her tutors in Vienna, not to the masters in Paris, not to the grandmasters in St. Petersburg, who called her the White Queen and begged her to compete publicly. She's been throwing every single game, and she has exactly 47 days to bankrupt him. This con didn't start in March. It started 6 months earlier with a letter, a debt, and a desperate father's plea. Before we get into the story, please subscribe to support future stories, and let us know when you start watching us. September 1886, London. Eleanor receives an urgent telegram at her townhouse. Her father, Lord Edward Hartwick, has made a catastrophic business investment with Duke Harrison Blackwell, a railway venture in India that collapsed. The loss? £200,000. Money her family doesn't have. The Duke is demanding payment by May 1st, 1887. If her father cannot pay, the Duke will seize Hartwick Hall, the family's ancestral estate. 500 years of history gone. But there's something else in her father's letter. Intelligence. The Duke has one weakness. Gambling. He cannot resist a wager, especially when he thinks he has a guaranteed win, and he considers himself a chess master. Eleanor knows better. She's watched the Duke play at London clubs. She's studied his games. He's competent, certainly, better than most gentlemen players. But he has patterns, predictable responses. He plays aggressively but without depth. He sees 3 moves ahead. Eleanor sees 12. A plan forms in her mind. Dangerous, audacious. It will require months of preparation and perfect execution. One mistake, and her family loses everything. She books passage to Ashworth Manor under the pretense of pursuing a courtship. The Duke is recently widowed, wealthy, and arrogant enough to believe any woman would want him. Eleanor's father encourages a match, not knowing his daughter's real intention. The Duke welcomes her. He's charmed by her beauty, her apparent naivety, and when she suggests they play chess, he's delighted. An opportunity to demonstrate his intellectual superiority. October 1886. Their first game. Eleanor opens with the Italian game, a basic, almost childish strategy. She makes obvious mistakes. Hanging pieces, weak pawn structures. The Duke crushes her in 23 moves. You play like a beginner, he says, not unkindly. Have you studied the game at all? Only a little, Your Grace, Eleanor replies softly. My governess taught me the moves, but I'm afraid I never developed much skill. A shame, the Duke says. Chess is a game of kings. It requires a sharp mind. Perhaps you could teach me? Eleanor suggests, her voice hopeful. The Duke's ego expands visibly. I would be honored, my dear. And so the pattern begins. Twice a week, sometimes 3 times, they play. Every game, Eleanor loses, but not too quickly. She makes each defeat look natural, convincing. She plays just well enough that the Duke believes he's teaching her, just poorly enough that he never suspects deception. She catalogs his patterns. When he's ahead, he becomes reckless. When pressured, he defaults to knight forks. He overvalues his bishops. He neglects his king's safety. In the endgame, November arrives. Eleanor has lost 17 games consecutively. The Duke invites friends to watch him play his protege. They gather in the library, sipping brandy, laughing as Eleanor blunders her queen in a simple trap. Perhaps Lady Eleanor would be better suited to checkers, one gentleman suggests. The room erupts in laughter. Eleanor smiles graciously, as if the insult doesn't wound her. But inside, she's calculating. Soon, very soon, December. Christmas approaches. The Duke hosts a grand party at Ashworth Manor. Nobles from across England attend. The Duke, drunk on wine and self-importance, announces a challenge. Gentlemen, Lady Eleanor and I shall demonstrate the art of chess. Observe how I've attempted to educate this charming but hopeless student. They play before an audience of 30. Eleanor executes her worst performance yet. She moves her queen into an obvious bishop trap. She castles on the wrong side. She promotes a pawn to a knight instead of a queen. The crowd howls with laughter. The Duke wins in 19 moves. You see, the Duke proclaims, some minds simply cannot grasp the complexity of chess. It requires logic, strategy, foresight, qualities more suited to the masculine intellect. Eleanor curtsies to the applause. You're far too generous with your time, Your Grace. That night, alone in her guest chambers, Eleanor writes in her journal, every game recorded, every pattern analyzed. She's building something. A comprehensive profile of the Duke's chess psychology, and she's noticed something crucial. The Duke keeps a ledger in his private study, a record of all his wagers, horse races, card games, property speculation. He's addicted to risk, but only when he believes the odds are in his favor. The ledger shows he's won £50,000 in the past year alone, but it also shows his current liquid assets, £180,000 in accessible funds, not enough to cover her father's debt and maintain his lifestyle. If she can strip away that cushion, make him desperate, he'll make mistakes. Could you pretend to be incompetent for months while everyone mocked you, all for a greater plan? Subscribe and comment whether you think Eleanor's deception is brilliant strategy or dangerous manipulation. January 1887. Eleanor begins phase 2 of her plan. She needs to make the Duke gamble. Not on chess. Not yet. On everything else first. She needs to drain his confidence, his reserves, his judgment. She starts subtly. During dinner parties, she mentions investments she's heard about. Railway stocks in Argentina, silver mines in Nevada, shipping ventures in the Orient. She speaks carelessly, as if repeating gossip she doesn't understand. I overheard some gentlemen discussing at the club, she says, picking at her roasted pheasant. They seemed quite excited about the returns. The Duke listened. His eyes gleam. A woman who doesn't understand investments is the perfect source of unfiltered intelligence. He investigates every lead she drops. Most are legitimate enough to seem promising, but structured to fail within months. He invests £15,000 in the Argentine railways. The company collapses in March when the Buenos Aires government nationalizes the tracks. He loses everything. The silver mines? The vein runs dry after 2 months. Another £8,000 gone. But the Duke doesn't suspect Eleanor. How could he? She's a foolish woman who can't even win a chess match. She couldn't possibly be manipulating him. February 1887. Eleanor shifts tactics. During their chess games, she begins asking questions. Innocent questions. Naive questions. Your Grace, I've been wondering, she says, moving her knight into a terrible position. How does one determine the value of a wager? I mean, how do you know if odds are favorable? The Duke captures her knight with his bishop. It's mathematics, my dear. Probability. You calculate the likelihood of success against the potential return. That sounds terribly complicated, Eleanor says, her voice full of admiration. Not for a trained mind, the Duke replies. For instance, when I play you at chess, the probability of my victory is, let's say, 99%. Therefore, any wager on the outcome would need to account for that certainty. Eleanor's heart quickened. There it is, the opening she needed. People wager on chess matches? Constantly. The Duke says, gentlemen of means often play for stakes. Money, property, pride. How fascinating, Eleanor says. She pauses, then adds carefully, though I suppose no one would wager on our matches. The outcome is rather predictable. The Duke laughs. Indeed, though if someone were foolish enough to bet on you, I'd happily take that wager. Eleanor files this away. She needs to wait. Build more. Make him hungrier. March arrives. The Duke has lost another £12,000 on a shipping venture Eleanor casually mentioned. His liquid assets are down to £145,000. He's starting to feel the pressure. His steward has questioned the recent losses. His banker has suggested more conservative investments. The Duke hates being questioned, hates being seen as anything less than brilliant. His ego is bruising. He needs a win. A big, public, undeniable win. March 15th. Their chess match in the library. The Duke's 13th consecutive victory. He's more condescending than usual, more cruel. Eleanor recognizes the sign. He's compensating, reasserting dominance. That evening, the Duke hosts a dinner party. 12 guests, including Lord Pemberton, a notorious gambler who's won 30,000 pounds at the races this season. Over cigars and port, Pemberton mentions a high-stakes chess tournament in London. 5,000 pound entry fee. Winner takes 50,000 pounds. The best players in England will compete. You should enter Blackwell, Pemberton says. You're always boasting about your chess prowess. Here's your chance to prove it. The Duke hesitates. He knows he's good, but a tournament against true masters? That's different from beating Lady Eleanor. I'll consider it, the Duke says carefully. Eleanor sees her moment. She speaks up, her voice tentative. Your Grace is surely one of the finest players in England. I've never seen anyone play with such brilliance. The men laugh. My dear Lady Eleanor, Pemberton says, I mean no offense, but you've only seen the Duke play against you. More laughter. Eleanor blushes, playing her part perfectly. Of course, I only meant that His Grace has been so patient in teaching me. Surely that demonstrates mastery. The Duke's chest swells. Lady Eleanor makes a fair point. Teaching requires understanding the game at the highest level. Then prove it, Pemberton says. Enter the tournament. Unless you're afraid, the challenge hangs in the air. The Duke cannot back down. Not in front of his peers. Not when his ego is already wounded from his investment losses. I'll enter, the Duke declares, and I'll win. The men toast him. Eleanor smiles demurely, but inside, she's calculating. The tournament is in 3 weeks. The Duke will spend 5,000 pounds entering. He'll likely be eliminated in the second or third round by actual masters. Another blow to his finances and his pride, but that's not enough. Eleanor needs a final piece, the killing blow. She needs the Duke to wager everything on a single match against her. March 22nd, 1 week after the dinner party. Eleanor is in the library, practicing chess alone. She's arranged the pieces in a complex middle game position, studying variations. The Duke enters unexpectedly. He stops, watching her. For a moment, something flickers in his eyes. Suspicion? Interest? Eleanor quickly makes an amateurish move, disrupting the sophisticated position. Oh, Your Grace, I was just trying to remember yesterday's game, to learn from my mistakes. The Duke's suspicion fades. You've set up the board incorrectly, my dear. The queens start on their own color, do they? Eleanor looks at the board, feigning confusion. I can never remember the rules properly. The Duke shakes his head, amused, crisis averted. But Eleanor knows she's running out of time. April is approaching. Her father's debt comes due May 1st. She has 6 weeks to execute the final phase. March 28th. The Duke returns from London. The chess tournament was a disaster. He was eliminated in the second round by a 19-year-old prodigy from Cambridge. The defeat was humiliating. Public, his friends witnessed it. He's furious when he returns to Ashworth Manor, drinking heavily, smashing things in his study. Eleanor hears the servants whispering. The Duke's temper is dangerous when wounded. She waits 3 days, lets his anger ferment. Then, on March 31st, she makes her move. She finds him in the library, staring at the chessboard. Your Grace, she says softly, might we play? I find the game calming. The Duke looks up. His eyes are bloodshot. Why not? At least I can still defeat someone. They play. Eleanor loses even more pathetically than usual, hanging her queen on move 7. Would you deliberately sabotage someone's investments to save your family from ruin? Or is there a moral line Eleanor has already crossed? Hit subscribe and tell us where you stand on her tactics so far. The Duke captures her queen with barely concealed contempt. You're not even trying, are you? Eleanor's eyes widen. I am trying, Your Grace. I'm not very good at thinking ahead. Clearly, the Duke finishes the game in 12 more moves. He stands abruptly, pacing to the window. Do you know what happened in London, Lady Eleanor? I heard you withdrew from the tournament. Eleanor says carefully. I'm sure you had good reason. Withdrew. The Duke's laugh is bitter. I was humiliated, destroyed by a child who probably still has a governess, in front of half of London society. I'm certain you played brilliantly. Eleanor offers. I play like an amateur. The Duke snaps, like someone who thought he understood the game, but actually knew nothing. He pauses, looks at Eleanor. Like you, actually. Except you know you're terrible. I thought I was good. Eleanor lets silence fill the room. Then, very quietly, she speaks. Perhaps the young man was simply exceptional. A prodigy, as they say. Surely losing to someone like that is no shame. You don't understand, the Duke says, his voice rough. It's not just a loss. It's what it represents. Everything I touch lately turns to failure. Investments collapse. Business ventures crumble. Now, even chess, the one thing I thought I could rely on, He stops himself. Too much vulnerability shown. He straightens, regains his composure. Forgive me, Lady Eleanor. I shouldn't burden you with such matters. Your Grace, Eleanor says, standing. May I speak plainly? The Duke nods. You've been extraordinarily kind to me these past months, teaching me chess, tolerating my incompetence. I wish there was some way I could restore your confidence. Unless you've suddenly become a chess master, I don't see how, the Duke says with a weak smile. Eleanor pauses. This is it. The moment. She must be perfect. Actually, I had a thought. It may be silly, but she trails off. Yes, well, you said gentlemen often wager on chess matches. Perhaps a private match with stakes might restore your spirits? A guaranteed victory, as it were? The Duke's eyes narrow slightly. Against whom? Eleanor meets his gaze. Against me, your Grace. For a moment, the Duke simply stares. Then he bursts into laughter. Real laughter, not the bitter kind. You want to wager on a chess match? Against me? My dear girl, have you learned nothing from our previous games? I've learned I always lose, Eleanor says. That's precisely the point. You need a victory, a certain one. And I thought, well, if we played for stakes, it might feel more meaningful, more like the matches gentlemen play. The Duke is intrigued now. Eleanor can see it. The gambler in him, awakening. What stakes did you have in mind? I'm not sure, Eleanor says. I don't have much money of my own. Perhaps something symbolic? A family heirloom against one of your paintings? You wager a family heirloom on a chess match you know you'll lose? The Duke's tone is incredulous but interested. I'm trying to learn confidence, your Grace. My father always says the best way to overcome fear is to face it directly. If I can wager something precious and lose with grace, perhaps I'll finally learn the courage you've been trying to teach me. It's perfect psychology. Appealing to the Duke's vanity, his role as teacher, making it seem like her idea, her weakness, the Duke considers. What heirloom? Eleanor produces a sapphire necklace from her pocket. This belonged to my grandmother. It's worth perhaps £800. Not much by your standards, but precious to me. The Duke examines it. It's actually worth £1,200, but Eleanor knows he won't have it appraised before the match. And you want to wager this against one of my paintings? Only if you think it fair, Eleanor says. I know I'll lose, but perhaps the act of wagering itself will teach me something about courage. The Duke is hooked now. Eleanor can see it. The psychology is perfect. A guaranteed win. A valuable prize. An opportunity to feel masterful again. Very well, he says. We'll play tomorrow. Your necklace against my constable landscape in the East Gallery. Eleanor curtsies. Thank you, your Grace. I promise to play my absolute best. April 1st, 1887. April Fool's Day. How fitting. They play in the library. No audience this time. Just Eleanor, the Duke, and a chessboard. The necklace sits beside Eleanor's chair. The Duke has had the painting brought down, leaning against the wall. Eleanor plays her usual terrible game. She loses in 25 moves. The Duke claims his necklace, looking pleased with himself. You're very gracious in defeat, he observed. I expected to lose, Eleanor says. But you're right. There was something invigorating about the wager. It made the game feel more important. The thrill of stakes, the Duke agrees. It's what separates a casual game from a real contest. Eleanor pauses. Your Grace, might I propose something? Yes, another match, higher stakes this time, to truly test my courage. The Duke laughs. My dear, you just lost your grandmother's necklace. What else could you possibly wager? My dowry, Eleanor says quietly. The Duke's laughter stops. Your what? My dowry, £5,000. My father set aside for my marriage. I have access to it. I could wager against something of equivalent value from your estate. This is absurd, the Duke says, but his eyes are gleaming. The gambler in him is fully awake now. You want to wager your entire dowry on a chess match you cannot possibly win? I know it sounds mad, Eleanor says, but here's my thinking. I'm 27 years old, your Grace. No prospects of marriage, no particular skills or talent. My father's business ventures are struggling. That dowry is likely all I'll ever have to my name. She takes a breath. If I'm going to lose it eventually to poor management or bad luck, why not lose it courageously? In a way that at least teaches me something about myself, about facing fear. Do you think the Duke deserves what's coming to him, or is Eleanor's revenge going too far for a business debt? Subscribe and drop a comment with your thoughts on who the real villain is here. The Duke studies her face, looking for deception, for calculation. He sees only earnest desperation, a woman trying to find meaning in her meaningless life. And what would I wager against your 5,000 pounds? He asked. Eleanor has prepared for this. Your carriage house property in London. My father mentioned you own one. Similar value, I believe. The Duke owns 3 properties in London. The carriage house is worth 4,800 pounds, essentially equal to her dowry. He could easily afford to lose it, but he won't lose. That's the beauty of it. You're serious about this, the Duke says. Completely serious, Your Grace. The Duke paces a library. His mind is racing. Eleanor can see it. The investment losses have stung him. The tournament humiliation wounded him. But here's an opportunity. A guaranteed 5,000-pound win against an opponent he's beaten 32 times in a row. There's no risk, only reward, and the story he could tell. The woman so desperate to prove herself that she wagered everything and lost. It would restore his reputation as a shrewd gambler, a winner. When the Duke asks, tomorrow, Eleanor says, if that suits Your Grace, I'll need time to arrange the transfer fund. Tomorrow then, the Duke agrees. April 2nd, we'll make it official. Witnesses, a contract, everything proper. They shake hands. Eleanor's palm is deliberately clammy, trembling. The Duke's grip is firm, confident. He's already counting his winnings. That night, Eleanor doesn't sleep. She reviews every game she's thrown, every pattern she's identified. The Duke is predictable. He opens with the Spanish. He pushes pawns aggressively. He sacrifices material for positional advantage, but miscalculates the compensation. In the end game, he's weakest. He gets impatient, makes desperate moves. If she can survive to the end game with material equality, she can destroy him. But she needs to be careful. If she plays too well too quickly, he'll smell the con. She needs to play like someone who's been studying, who's improved, but who's still fundamentally outmatched. She needs to make him believe he's winning until the moment she crushes him. April 2nd, 1887, 2 p.m. The library is prepared. The Duke has invited 3 witnesses, Lord Pemberton, Sir Charles Whitmore, and his own solicitor, Mr. Graves. They'll verify the match, ensure everything is legal. Eleanor arrives in a simple day dress. Her dowry papers are in her reticule. Her hands shake visibly as she signs a contract. The Duke signs with a flourish. Last chance to withdraw. Lady Eleanor, Pemberton says, this is your entire future you're wagering. I understand, Lord Pemberton, Eleanor says softly, but I must do this for myself. The men exchange glances. They think she's mad, pathetic, but they're gentlemen. They won't stop her from ruining herself. The match begins at 2:30 p.m. Eleanor plays white. She opens with the king's pawn. The Duke responds with a Sicilian defense. Aggressive, exactly what she expected. The first 10 moves are standard theory. Eleanor plays cautiously, conservatively. The witnesses watch with mild interest. It looks like every other game between them. Move 11. Eleanor pushes her d-pawn, challenging the Duke's center. It's a slightly better move than she's ever made before. Not brilliant, but competent. The Duke notices. His eyebrow raises fractionally. Improving, Lady Eleanor? I've been studying, Your Grace, Eleanor says. I wanted to at least make this match competitive. The Duke smiles. Studying won't help her. He's certain of it. Move 15. The position is equal, maybe even slightly better for Eleanor. The witnesses are leaning forward now. This is lasting longer than usual. She's playing better. Whitmore whispers to Pemberton. She'll still lose, Pemberton whispers back. The Duke is a class above her. Move 20. Eleanor makes her first mistake. She hangs a pawn, leaving it undefended. The Duke captures immediately, but it's a trap. The capture opens a diagonal for Eleanor's bishop. She pins his knight to his king. The Duke frowns. He hadn't seen that. He moves his king, unpinning the knight, but he's lost tempo, lost initiative. Move 25. The position is complicated now. Pieces everywhere. Tactical complication. This is where Eleanor needs to be careful. She can't calculate too fast, too accurately. She needs to look like she's struggling. She sits back, chewing her lip, staring at the board. 2 minutes pass. 3. The witnesses are completely engrossed now. Finally, Eleanor moves her rook. It looks random, defensive, but it's actually the second best move in the position. Good enough to maintain her slight advantage. Not so good that it looks calculated. The Duke plays quickly, confidently. He's still certain he's winning, but the position is shifting. Pieces trade off. Knights for bishops, rooks for rooks. Move 35. They reach the end game. King, 3 pawns and a bishop each. Material equal. Position equal. This is where the Duke gets dangerous. And this is where Eleanor is at her strongest. She studied endgame theory for years. She knows every theoretical position, every technique. The Duke knows the basics but relies on instinct. Move 40. Eleanor advances her king. Aggressive, controlling key squares. The Duke mirrors her, but he's one tempo behind. Always one tempo behind. Move 45. Eleanor sacrifices a pawn. It looks desperate. The witnesses gasp. The Duke captures eagerly. But the sacrifice's purpose is deflected the Duke's bishop. Open a pathway for Eleanor's king. Her remaining pawns are suddenly mobile, dangerous. Move 48. The Duke realizes he's in trouble. His bishop is poorly placed. His king is cut off from the action. Eleanor's pawns are advancing. He tries to create counterplay, pushes his own pawns forward. But Eleanor's calculations are perfect. She's seen this position 100 times in her studies. Move 52. Eleanor's pawn reaches the 7th rank. One move from promotion. The Duke's bishop cannot stop it. His king is too far away. Can you imagine the tension of playing the most important chess match of your life while pretending to barely understand the game? Subscribe and tell us if you saw the ending coming, or if Eleanor's con surprised you. The Duke stares at the board. His face has gone pale. He calculates desperately. Every variation ends the same way. Eleanor queens her pawn. Checkmate follows within 3 moves. This is impossible, the Duke whispers. Eleanor says nothing. Her heart is pounding, but her face remains calm, uncertain, as if she doesn't quite understand what's happening. Move 53. The Duke tries one last desperate trick. He advances his own pawn, threatening to queen. But Eleanor has seen this. Her bishop swoops across the board, capturing the pawn, simultaneously defending and attacking. Move 54. Eleanor's pawn promotes to a queen. The Duke's shoulders slump. He knows it's over, but he cannot accept it. Not yet. He plays on. 5 more moves of feudal resistance. Then, finally, checkmate. Silence fills the library. The witnesses are frozen, mouths open. Lord Pemberton is the first to speak. She won. Impossible, the Duke says. He's still staring at the board. This is impossible. She's never won. Not once. Not in 32 games. Eleanor stands slowly. Her hands are still trembling, but now it's adrenaline, not deception. Your Grace, I believe the contract stipulates. You cheated. The Duke interrupts. His voice is rising. You must have cheated. There's no other explanation. How could I have cheated? Eleanor asks calmly. We've been playing in front of witnesses. Every move observed. Mr. Graves, the solicitor, clears his throat. Your Grace, I watched the entire match. Lady Eleanor played fairly. There was no deception. Then she's been... The Duke's mind is racing. The terrible truth is dawning on him. You've been playing poorly on purpose. All these months, every game, you've been letting me win. Eleanor meets his eyes. For the first time, she doesn't look away, doesn't appear meek or uncertain. Yes, Your Grace, I have. But why? The Duke's voice cracks. What possible reason? My father's debt. Eleanor says simply, 200,000 pounds due May 1st. Money we don't have. You would have taken Hartwick Hall. 500 years of my family's history. I couldn't let that happen. The Duke's face goes from pale to red. So this entire courtship was a lie? The chess lessons? The affection? The courtship was my father's idea. Eleanor says, the chess lessons were my own. I needed to study you, learn your patterns, your weaknesses, and there were many, Your Grace. Pemberton laughs. He can't help it. The audacity of it. Blackwell, you've been conned. Brilliantly conned. Shut up. The Duke snarls. He turns back to Eleanor. The investments, the railway stocks, the silver mines. You fed me those leads. I did, Eleanor confirms. I needed you desperate enough, wounded enough, to accept a wager you thought you couldn't lose. It took 6 months to position you properly. How much have I lost? The Duke asked quietly. In bad investments? 35,000 pounds. Today's match? 4,800 pounds. But that's not why I'm here, Your Grace. Eleanor reaches into her reticule. She produces a document. This is a promissory note. I'm willing to sell you back your carriage house property for 200,000 pounds. The Duke's eyes widen. That property is worth less than 5,000 pounds. You want me to pay 40 times its value. I want you to forgive my father's debt. Eleanor says, transfer the note to me. Write off the 200,000 pounds he owes you. In exchange, you get your property back and this entire matter stays private. And if I refuse, the Duke asks. Eleanor's smile is cold. Then I take ownership of your carriage house. I sell it for its actual value. And I spend the next year telling everyone in London society exactly what happened here today. how Duke Harrison Blackwell, the man who mocks women's intellectual capacity, was systematically destroyed at chess by a woman who pretended to be incompetent for 6 months. She pauses. Your reputation is already damaged from the tournament humiliation. Your friends already know you made poor investments. But this story would end you socially. Every club would whisper about you. Every drawing room would laugh. The Duke, who was too arrogant to see he was being conned. Pemberton is grinning openly now. She has you, Blackwell, completely. The Duke looks at his witnesses, at the contract on the table, at the chessboard with his humiliating final position. He's trapped, cornered, check and checkmate. Give me the document, he says finally. Eleanor hands him the debt note. The Duke takes his pen and writes across it in large letters, debt forgiven in full. April 2nd, 1887. He signs it, hands it back to Eleanor. Are we finished? Almost, Eleanor says. She produces another paper. This is a contract stating you will never contact my family again, never seek business with my father, never mention this matter to anyone. In exchange, I will never speak of what transpired here. The Duke signs it without reading. He just wants this over. Eleanor gathers her document. She curtsies to the witnesses. Gentlemen, thank you for your service today. Lord Pemberton, Sir Charles, Mr. Graves, I trust your discretion in this matter. Pemberton nods. You have my silence, Lady Eleanor, and my admiration. That was the finest long con I've ever witnessed. Eleanor turns to leave. The Duke's voice stops her. Were you really trained in Vienna? Paris? St. Petersburg? Yes, Your Grace. Eleanor says, by the best masters in Europe. They call me the White Queen. They wanted me to compete publicly. I refused. I thought women playing chess professionally would be seen as undignified. She pauses at the door. I was wrong about that. There's nothing undignified about using one's gifts, even if it means pretending to be foolish to catch a fool. The door closes behind her. The Duke sits alone in his library. The chessboard mocks him. Every piece a reminder of his arrogance, his blindness. He sweeps them to the floor with a violent gesture. Outside, Eleanor climbs into her carriage. Her hands are shaking now. Real trembling, not performed. She's done it. 6 months of planning, of performing, of calculated deception. Her family's home is saved. The carriage pulls away from Ashworth Manor. Eleanor allows herself one moment of satisfaction. Then she pulls out a fresh journal and begins writing. Every detail of the con, every psychological manipulation, every carefully calculated loss. Perhaps someday, she thinks, she'll publish it. Teach other women how to beat men at their own game, how to use underestimation as a weapon, how to turn perceived weakness into devastating strength. The rain has stopped. Sunlight breaks through the clouds. Eleanor smiles. The White Queen has claimed her victory, and the Duke will never see another chessboard without remembering the woman who destroyed him while he laughed at her failure. Thank you for staying until the very end. There's another story even better than this one displaying on your screen.